Formula One is back in Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix with tickets exceptionally hard to come by. A big dread the McLaren won't be able to deliver a home podium for DR and Lakeside Drive's first in-person Grand Prix. Just in time to celebrate 100,000 all-time downloads. G'day, my name is James Baldwin and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we're previewing the Australian Grand Prix. And I'm joined, as always, by my friends and yours. It's the return of the Mac. G'day, Campy.
Boys, gentlemen, ladies, how are you?
Very, very well, mate.
Sorry, I forgot
Good to have
Freya.
you back. Classic. Freya, g'day. How are you?
Yeah, I am here. Thank you.
Good, thanks for being here. I'm Dave Munnis. How are you, my friend?
I am very well. It's race week. Let's go, boys and girls. Keen as.
Yeah. Very, very keen. Certainly he and I will be at the racetrack Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be a very, very good week. Look, we hope to see you there as well. If you want to know more about what we're doing around the Oz Grand Prix, follow our socials. It's the best place because we'll have some updates for you as we go along. But a massive thank you to you for listening and watching as always. And thank you to those of you who have left us a review or a rating. Very, very much appreciated. A massive shout out rather to Hudson from Australia, who's left us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and Sydney DC, who says James and Campy are legends, completely ignoring the rest of the crew. Tommy T specifically felt attacked. Big fan of that. Big fan of that. Well, lady and gents, we're back for the Australian Grand Prix. Who would have thought that it was actually going to happen? Certainly not us 2 years ago. But before we get into talking about the Oz Grand Prix, Campy, I want to get your thoughts on the first couple of races of the 2022 season. We haven't yet heard your thoughts. Talk to us about your hot tip so far.
The hot tip is to not talk about McLaren because that whatever is going on in that garage is an absolute shambles. What else? Thank God we've left the United Arab Emirates. What an absolute shit show of an area that is. I mean, drivers almost getting bombed off the track, and the money talks, doesn't it? And so it's a bit of a shame. Thank God we're at the spiritual start of the season, Melbourne, this week, so that'll be good. Racing's been pretty good. I like the wheel-to-wheel stuff. Drivers have had to be a bit more crafty about the way they get the passing done on track, which I've liked. I don't think we could hope for any more than what we've had on track in terms of wheel-to-wheel racing. This is a step in the right direction. It can only get better from here, but it's the standard from the start has been really good. So it's all credit to F1 and the designers and of the cars to get them to do what they want. So that's good. We've got a few exciting news things happening this week too. It's all sort of happening. We've got a Vegas race too. So I can confirm that will be the largest weekend I've ever had next year, hopefully. So that'll be good.
It's Saturday night too, which is interesting. Well, before we talk about Las Vegas though, I just want to get your thoughts, Campy, on what's happening at the front of the pack and the absence, I suppose, of Mercedes from being there. Of course, coming out of testing, and even Munnis said this, there was a massive amount of sand, allegedly, still in that Mercedes cockpit, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They really have dropped back, and almost the opposite of what we were saying, Campy, from last year, where we were concerned Red Bull would be putting in so much effort and energy into what was going on for last year's car to get that victory, that maybe this year's car wasn't going to be so good. But it seems the Mercedes have suffered that rather than Red Bull.
Yeah, I think Mercedes has had a perspective on how to make a car fast, and I don't think the motor was the most important thing about making that car fast. I think the chassis right throughout the start of the turbo hybrid era was what made them so much better than everyone else. This year, they've obviously dropped off, and they haven't made the gains in the engine compared to everybody else, which is a shame. But reliability is a big thing too, because if you look at the Mercedes powered cars that are on the grid. They're the ones that seemingly are to be struggling more so than anyone else. I mean, the Ferrari engine, that looks absolutely those cars look so much quicker. I mean, look at the Haas and the turnaround they've had from last year to this year, and I think that's due to the Ferrari engine. So, I don't think it's. I mean, but Mercedes have lost a lot of technical personnel as well, so that's tough. And why wouldn't teams want to poach the best teams, engineers and designers right throughout in the key roles that they play? So I think these things happen, but it's an equalisation of the sport, and that's what we really wanted and we were really looking for.
Munnis, in 2017, a question was put at the Australian Grand Prix, the beginning of the season, to Lewis Hamilton and to Daniel Ricciardo and to Fernando Alonso about what they would like to see in the future of Formula One. Lewis Hamilton said he wanted a race in Miami. Daniel Ricciardo said he wanted a race in Las Vegas. And Fernando Alonso said he wanted equal engines for everyone. Now, two of those three things have come to fruition. Lewis Hamilton said he didn't want that. Maybe he does, because it seems that Alpine Renault engine is a lot faster than the Mercedes engine, at least so far this season. But this is a big shift, isn't it, for what we've seen Formula One? It really is now leaning into this Americanization of the sport, and it's not a bad thing, with Drive to Survive absolutely thriving from a Netflix point of view. But we now have 3 races in the US. Do you think this is maybe going in the wrong direction with sort of putting all of their eggs in this United States basket? Or do you think it's a positive thing because we're giving this massive potential fan base more races to go and actually witness in person?
Yeah, look, for me, I think it's positive having 3 races in the US. For me, the missed opportunity is that we're going to Vegas and not going to somewhere like Laguna Seca. And yeah, people are going to say, look, it's a grade 2 circuit from the FIA. It doesn't have the grade 1 status for it to hold an F1 race. Nevertheless, in Las Vegas, we don't even have a track yet. For me, missed opportunity. I really want to go to somewhere like, Laguna Seca. It's got the history, it's got the mystique, and I'm going there to watch racing. Whereas Vegas, I'm going there to get off my tits, and I'm not going to see a race at all. So there's cars out there. True Irishman,
really? I like it. Yeah.
But the move to the States is excellent.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Laguna Seca, lots of people have also said, oh, well, then the corkscrew, you're not going to get a Formula One car. Well, just go look at Zach Brown's Instagram. He and I think Mika Hakkinen drove some old McLarens around there only a couple of months ago. So it can be done. It can be done. Look, I think everyone would love to see that, especially if you've played any form of car video game. So Campy hasn't done that, like Gran Turismo. You know, Laguna Seca is one of the legendary tracks, absolutely. But Freya, for you, I mean, because I know Campy's all in, this is important. I guess it's closer for you to go and watch and better for your time zones to go and watch more US races. But Las Vegas, it's different. Saturday night, so not a Sunday afternoon race, a Saturday night race. They're really leaning into the party vibe of the city. Do you think, though, this is coming at the cost of some of these older tracks? Because there has been some conversation around people would rather see Las Vegas as a track rather than Monaco as a track, because the potential is that there would actually be some racing there. What do you think about that side of the argument?
Yeah, and I do kind of agree. I would like to see some of those old tracks revived, and to Munnis's point, maybe they're not in the condition that they need to be right now, but as we've seen with Albert Park and the amazing upgrades that they're bringing to Australia, there's no reason why they can't be doing that with some of these older tracks. So if you're going to bring another race to the US, I would have loved to have seen some of the older ones revisited as options. I think it's a positive that we're going there. It shows the growth of Formula One in the US with a 3rd race. And if you're seeing a stronger market in the US and that becomes a real opportunity for them, it might give them less of a reason to go back to places like Saudi. So I'm all for it. But I think potentially with a place like Vegas, the racing could be kind of the second spectacle, I suppose. So I wonder if it will be compromised on the quality of the racing just because of the absolute scenes of having a race in Vegas. But it's exciting. We haven't been there for 40 years or so, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
Campy, obviously Texas is your favorite part of the United States.
It's the only part of the United States.
Okay, fair enough. Las Vegas, though, is a thought process for you. It is, as I mentioned just before, a big party town, and the big vibe is there. Some drivers have already said they'll be very potentially distracted by everything else that's going on, especially on a Saturday night. But it really is going to be a spectacle, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that city is known for, other than its partying and its gambling, is for putting on events. And, I mean, there's so much to do when you're there. There's so many hundreds of things doing well. I know they've got an NFL team now, and that NFL team, when they're playing in Vegas that weekend, brings in, I think it's 750,000 people to the city every weekend. So it's quite an accessible place to put on big events, and it could turn out to be a bit of a jewel in the crown for F1 as a spectacle. But, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not sure. 2 races in the States is enough for me. I'm not sure we need a third, but I can understand the decision-making. Talk about bigger markets. Why don't we go somewhere like India, an emerging global superpower, and it's, technology and growth in those areas are massive. I think India's the sort of places we should be looking at. Even places like Sri Lanka too, that would be cool to go to. Different track conditions, really hot over there. And, they're hardcore motorsport lovers too in some of those areas as well. But this is the trajectory the sport is taking. And with Stefano Domenicali, he's come out publicly and said he'll give up places like Monaco and Spa, and doesn't really care about the history of the sport. It's about taking it forward as an entertainment thing. And I'm not sure I love that, because I think the money involved, particularly in places like Vegas, Miami, and the UAE, is just astronomical. And there's so many places that deserve racetracks that, can't compete on that level, which is a real shame. I mean, our government subsidises tens of millions of dollars a year to get the race, and that's only going to go up. But if that can be privately funded by, enterprises in these big cities, then, I mean, places like Melbourne in the future are just going to get thrown away. So, as always, there's politics in the sport, and that's the way it goes, unfortunately, sometimes. But it will be it should be something they do biannually, once every 3 years or something, maybe even 2, not every year, because I don't think it needs to happen every year.
Yeah, it's look, I mean, I agree with you that it's potentially too many races in the US. Having 3 in one country is a bit much, but I mean, the size of the country, at least they can spread it all out over the place, which is ideal. For what Domenicali said, and it's a good point, because I wanted to bring this up as well for the rest of you guys, is that I'm not sure if you saw this, but he said, as Campy just said, he's happy to not renew contracts for those historic races that we have seen last year and the year before, certainly those who filled in for the COVID round of 2020 that had to jump in the European rounds. Do you think that's a shame, or do you maybe agree with him that it's time to take Formula One to these new markets, and with the rise of Drive to Survive and other things, that it's more about engaging with an audience all over the place rather than just traditionally going back to where we've normally raced? Munnis, let's start with you.
I like the idea of exploring new markets. Even I think South Africa would be a great place to go and race. India, as Campy said, it already has a Grade 1 track, so it's good to go. I'm all for that, and whether it was to happen biannually or whatever, I'd actually be quite supportive of that. To give up somewhere like Spa, honestly, it's my favorite weekend of the year. I actually think I would struggle if we start giving up Spas, Silverstones, even Monaco, the history and the prestige of the sport. I just don't want to watch a sport where we just race past iconic statues and, cities around the world. That's not really racing for me. I love the sport for the racing. I don't just want to see a bloody cruise liner parked out beside the track. I mean, we saw that how many times at Saudi. Yeah. That's not really what it's about for me. Do you know? And I actually really enjoy Spa. You get to see the crowd. You can hear the crowd. And that's why I like those old tracks. You don't necessarily get that in the city circuits. That said, don't get me wrong, Baku's one of my favorite weekends of the year as well, and it's a street circuit. So that's sort of my point of view on it.
Freya?
No, I tend to agree. I think there's a balance between looking for the future in terms of what the future of the sport is. How do you engage those new fans who might be looking for a spectacle and to see something different? But then it doesn't mean you have to do away with your history. You know, you learn so much from that. And it's such an incredible part of the sport, you know, being able to look back to those races so long ago in places like Monaco, that there's a huge amount of prestige that comes with that, which is also valuable to the sport as well. So I think there's a balance there. It would definitely be a shame to see them doing away with some of those older tracks, even if they're not producing the best racing. It's more about, okay, how do we make adjustments to the track so that we improve the racing, but keep that, keep that location potentially. I think the other thing is, if we're talking about fan engagement, some of these new tracks, they're actually incredibly inaccessible, whether it's because of ticket prices or location or whatever. So we can talk about fan engagement, but it's actually not that effective at the moment.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And specifically for Miami, as we know, ticket prices, ridiculous, just absolutely ridiculous.
But can I just say, like, F1 makes like places like, if we think Suzuka, you think of 130R, right? You think of Monza, or you think of Italy, automatically you're thinking of the main straight at Monza. A place like Silverstone, it's Maggots and Beckett's, or Spa, you know, it's Eau Rouge. I mean, that's what people love, and it doesn't matter where you go. Cars and F1 cars on these tracks are driving at the absolute limit, make these corners and make these places iconic, and that's what you want to try and build on. You don't want them driving past Caesar's Palace because, I mean, Caesar's Palace has a good brand, you know. I mean, it looks cool, it's a nice spectacle for a once or twice thing, you know, but it's not something we need every year. And more races every year for F1, mate. F1 would be doing plenty better if it capped it to 18 races a year. And it was, you know, I mean, think of the NFL and their season over there, 16 weeks plus, you know, maybe 5 weeks of finals. If you drag these races out to a 23, even to a 25, 27 race calendar, just gets to the point where that's once a fortnight throughout the year, and people just aren't going to watch like they used to.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also, it's the toll on those who are traveling with the sport as well, not just the people you see on television, including the drivers and the presenters, but the teams and what that means for their at-home relationships as well. It's a very, very interesting point, and certainly I can only imagine that the teams are absolutely buggered after 2 back-to-back weekends in the desert, being hot and moving everything around and having the stress of what was going on in Saudi Arabia may not have been so ideal. What is ideal, though, is the fact, guys, that we have just passed 100,000 downloads, which is incredible. Campy, you and I started this in my front room back in 2019 as a good idea, Pinata, and we kind of
pre-Drive to Survive.
Yeah, we were important before Drive to Survive, although I think Drive to Survive was released just after we did our first episode. Anyway, you can't listen to our first couple of episodes anymore because I've got rid of them because they're just, I mean,
shit.
They weren't ideal. But of course, not only are we growing in downloads and numbers, which is fantastic, and thank you again for listening and tuning in so regularly. It also seems we've been growing the last couple of weeks. But of course, we've got Freya and Munnis now joining us as part of our regular panel. So I thought I'd ask you two, before we talk about the Australian Grand Prix, to talk a little bit about what was Oz F1 and now Lakeside Drive, how you came across it, and what you've been enjoying before stepping into being on the panels, what you've been enjoying of the podcast. Munnis, shall we start with you? Because obviously we also did the MotoGP podcast for a little bit as well there.
Yeah, well, I think I get into it through boredom, which was thanks to our lockdowns here in Melbourne. Pretty much, I really get delved into motorsport. It's something I was always loved to watch, but never really had the time. And then with lockdowns, just sat in the house. So I really got engaged with Formula One, and that's when you guys came along on your podcast, and I sort of started engaging with you all pretty early in the piece, which was fun. Really enjoyed that. And I was also getting into sort of my GT3s, GT4s, endurance racing, stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the Discord and getting to chat to people and different perspectives in the sport, and it really grew from there. And you guys were pretty cool to get on with. Loved listening to you guys. Campy I found hilarious. And interestingly, my Tommy was actually the one who, a lot of his opinions I sort of shared as well, which is interesting. Over time, that's changed though, because often, fan, whereas I'm not so much. But I always love listening to you guys, and you brought a bit of humor to the sport, and Campy says what he wants. You don't usually get that in a Formula One podcast. It's usually quite polished and no one really says what they think. But then Campy came along and just changed all that.
Jeez, what a glowing review. Campy, would you like a right of reply?
I missed the question for some audio issues, but 100,000 downloads, I think, to me, that's like shocking.
Yeah, it's huge.
Shocking that there's 100,000 downloads. So thank you. It's been a good experience, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. I've said that before. We just consistently take the piss out of each other and have a laugh while talking about something we love. So yeah, thanks for the support. It's good. And Munnis, I'm not sure that Tommy T's ideas are good, because he doesn't even watch the sport 90% of the time. He just sort of comes on mine and James's coattails. But anyway, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we want it to be still fans, right? And for fans, Freya, you are additionally a fan, and more so now in the deep end. But how did you come across us, and talk to me about your journey to get here?
I think I came across it because I was pretty fed up with everything else when it came to the content that you hear from Formula One, the bias and just everyone constantly being mean to Danny Rick, and just whinging about time zones and everything else. I just was looking for a different take on things, and preferably an Australian voice to do that, because you kind of, especially when you were wanting to hear more about what might be going on with, for example, Ricardo, I was like, I think this is going to have to come from an Australian voice to hear what I want to hear. Was just looking around for more content and came across it. And then I probably wasn't quite like Munnis. I didn't kind of engage straight away, I suppose, with the broader Lakeside Drive community. But just the more I listened, the more I wanted to know, the more I wanted to engage with other people who are listening to the show as well, and then with you guys. So it's I suppose been something that just the more I got of it, the more I wanted of it. So it's been pretty fun.
Well, look, thank you to you both for obviously listening and now being part of the show. We love it, all three of us, and I love that we can have a crack at Tommy T because he's not here. Makes me very, very happy.
We love you, Tommy.
All of us, including Freya and Munnis, really, really appreciate you for listening, subscribing, and sharing this show around. As Campy said, 100,000 downloads seems ridiculous. It kind of is a made-up number, really, in our heads from when we started back in 2019. But we bloody love doing this, and we're going to have a great week at the Australian Grand Prix. Let's talk about the Australian Grand Prix. Campy, let's start with you. We've got a brand new surface on the circuit, and there's been some adjustments at 9 and 10 and some other parts of the circuit as well. Brand new cars. We haven't had racing here for a couple of years. What do you think we can expect for F1 2022 at Albert Park?
I think there'll be more passing than we've ever seen anywhere in Melbourne. I think that's a given, but I think we're going to see more passing on this track than we do the rest of the year. We'll have the traditional passing places like into the turn 1 chicane, and then into 3 and 4 down the back straight, down the front straight. Sorry, but then this new section where they've cut out the chicanes, and we'll have a big braking zone or area into turn 11. I think that's going to produce massive amounts of passing opportunities for people. So I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't seen any simulations yet. I know Albert Park Grand Prix Corporation put out like a 5-part little thing on YouTube, but I didn't really get a good sense of how the track will actually drive. So I haven't seen it. So I'm looking forward to Friday to get an actual real look. Track times, they're going to be pretty quick this year. They're going to be down into those sort of 1:15s as opposed to like the 1:28s. I think we've previously done. So that's going to be exciting too. I think, and wheel-to-wheel racing this year, it's looking like a really exciting track to go to.
Yeah. Freya, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like it's this isn't going to be a popular opinion probably, but maybe a blessing in disguise that Melbourne had the break, that you've now coinciding new cars with the upgrade to the track. So we're seeing cars that seem to be able to follow a lot more closely. We're getting much better and more sustained overtaking, and really amazing passes that kind of, don't end after one go. And I think when we combine that with the changes to this track, it should be quite an interesting race. And there's also changes to the pit lane as well. I think they've widened that. So they're going to see potentially that playing much more of a role in terms of people playing more with their strategy in Melbourne in comparison to previous years as well. So I'm really excited to watch this at midnight, as it will be at my time zone. I get to whinge about it at least once, because I'm usually pretty lucky with time zone watching. But so this is my chance to have a bit of a moan about it. But I think, the combined change between the cars and the track have actually coincided pretty well to result in a good race, interesting race.
Munnis, it's great that we finally get a good race in our time zone. Everyone else can bloody whinge about it all they want, but put yourselves in the bin, because we have to deal with it with the other 22 races every bloody year. So I don't care. We're going to make the most of this, absolutely. But also for you, mate, there's arguably not been the best racing for the last couple of years where the Grand Prix happened in Albert Park. As Freya said, it's coinciding probably the best time. We've got this massive demand for tickets, which we've never seen. There's never been a sellout that early on, at least, for the Australian Grand Prix. And certainly now the attitude of a lot of Australians is they want to get and see DR in a McLaren, or at least they thought they did, maybe before the first two races. But for you and for what this means for the Australian Grand Prix moving forward, do you think that we can start seeing this as one of the best circuits on the calendar again?
I absolutely hope so. As Freya says, the new cars, the upgrades, it's just going to be perfect timing. And everybody in Australia is sort of fallen in love with this Drive to Survive, whether, obviously myself and Campy aren't big fans of it, but plenty of other people are. So there's a lot of engagement in the sport. And we're going to, it's unbelievable the numbers that's going to go to this over the course of the 4 days. And the one thing I'm really looking forward to is the widening of the track. I think we're going to see a lot of cars ride through turn 3, turn 6, which is going to be great to watch. So I can't wait to get down there. Can't wait to see the cars out on track. And I can't wait to basically just enjoy the atmosphere, because there's going to be so many people there and everybody's going to be pumped. And it's been so long since we've had racing here. And if you live in Melbourne, you know that week when you wake up on the Thursday morning and you hear that Minardi going around the track screaming at 6:30 a.m. It is the best thing in the world. It is so exciting.
So good.
And we also get an air show as well. So James, looking forward to that too.
Yes. Yeah.
What have we got this year? Do you know?
It'll be a Stupid Hornet again. Super Hornet, sorry. That will be rocking around unless the F-35 comes down, but I don't know if they're utilising that yet for their air show performances. We'll see. Look, either way, not unhappy. Maybe all of it. And roulettes will be there as well. It'll be a good time for every Air Force pilot who's specifically flying that, not for the rest of them. Okay, let's talk about other things that we should be watching for in the race. First of all, Seb Vettel has been cleared. He's back for the Australian Grand Prix. Nico did a great job stepping into a car that wasn't so fast, wasn't as good as what we saw him in that Racing Point, as we've said previously. But for him and for Aston Martin, he's got a lot of work to do, doesn't he? Campy, he's missed 2 races now. It's at least the spiritual start of the season for him is the start of the season for him. But all the way down the back of the pack and missing 2 races worth of testing. What do you think we can expect for Seb? Because it's not been the start that Aston Martin would have wanted.
He'll beat Stroll. How good was race 1? You've already spoken about it. How good was when Hulkenberg gets the call up, which I loved. Loved to see that. And he comes out and beats Stroll in qualifying. I was like, that right there says everything you need to know about that dud Canadian. And, look, he's a shit driver, Lance Stroll. I mean, to get out qualified by a guy that hasn't driven a car in 18 months, new regs, new everything, come in and do that. That was amazing. So, no, Seb will be fine. He's had enough. I think he's had enough time in the car testing-wise. He'll be fine. It might take him a couple of sessions to get up to scratch, but he'll beat Stroll. So, and he's got hair. He's got hair this year, so
He's come back.
He's flying.
Full Tony Hawk. Full Tony Hawk. Munnis, for this year, we've got one rookie in Zhou Guan Yu. He's had a pretty okay start. We sort of spoke a little bit, didn't we, about Yuki Tsunoda's performance under lights in terms of a rookie that did well at the beginning of last year. What do you think his chances are for the Australian Grand Prix? Not in the desert, not under lights, but the Alfa Romeo, of course, being powered by that Ferrari power unit and teammate with Valtteri Bottas. Do you think he's going to have a better ascension this season compared to Yuki and others' first season last year?
I actually think he does. I've been quite impressed by him so far. He's had anti-stall issues in the last 2 races. Without that in the last race, he probably would have finished in the points. So that would have been 2 points finishes in a row. I'm quite impressed by how he's going. I think he'll have a good season, and I think he'll do pretty well around Albert Park.
Yeah, his teammate, obviously absolutely bloody brilliant. Valtteri is on fire for everything, including social media content and the rest of it. His whole vibe is totally different. But someone else's vibe who's totally different is Charles Leclerc, at least according to someone in the Formula One paddock. But it's an interesting one because we've spoken about Freya, haven't we, that Carlos has been very, very frustrated in that other Ferrari to not have been matching at least Charles Leclerc's times. Do you think, now that there's meat on the table, that this Ferrari pairing, just like Campy would have said years and years ago as the F1 prophet that he allegedly was, although maybe you're now taking that mantle, that we're seeing Charles really just pick it up and run with it, and maybe Carlos struggling to close that gap?
I think it was interesting watching Charles over the last 2 races. He seems to be a lot more calm in comparison to last year, both during the race, but then also off the track. He's much more settled. He's making good decisions under pressure, which has been, I think, a bit of a vulnerability for him in the past. And we are used to seeing that from some of our more experienced drivers, VB and even Sainz himself, I suppose. And with sports like this, there's so many things that are important to work on in order to perform at that elite, exceptional level. And you're talking about things like, your confidence, your goal setting, and your visualization, motivation, emotional regulation, and making decisions under cognitive load as well. There's a lot of really complex underpinnings, I suppose, when it comes to elite performance, and an adjustment or a focus in any one of those areas is going to give you an edge. And I think what we're seeing from behaviour with Charles, it looks like he's been working on that stuff. And it'll be interesting because I think from a teammate perspective, he'll also need to make sure that he can play to his strengths as well. But you've definitely seen a change in how he's carrying himself and his decision-making, it's a pretty big shift. So I think, I want to see Sainz match his performance, and I think he'll have to then be careful that when he is frustrated, because perhaps he's not side by side with Charles, he doesn't let that affect his racing and his own decision-making and performance.
Campy, Carlos has been up against someone as good as Charles in Max Verstappen, of course, his time at Toro Rosso. He has pace, and we've always said that he's one of our favourite performers, but as you say, meat on the table. It's now a thing for Ferrari, and 2 races in, they're looking pretty dominant and certainly championship contenders. How does that change the behaviour between the 2 drivers?
Oh, I think it ultimately will. If it's like this, to the end of the year, there's going to be some tension and there's going to be some incidents on track. There's going to be members within the team that are putting more of an effort into a particular driver, depending on who's winning the world championship. It's just, these things happen. I think Carlos is traditionally a bit of a late starter anyway. He's never quite, it always sort of takes him 3 or 4 races to, get up to scratch where he needs to be. But hey, mate, Carlos is a superstar. He's not happy with the car. Charles is. Now, that could mean that Ferrari is favouring Charles a bit. I don't think it's like that. I just think Carlos isn't there with the car. But once Carlos gets there with the car, he's going to have weekends where he makes Charles, he'll beat him by 20 seconds on the track. And that's what we haven't seen thus far. Carlos has been there and pretty bloody close. If it wasn't for cars in front of him, race pace, lap by lap, they are so comparable, it's not funny. says something to me that Carlos isn't happy and Charles is. So once Carlos gets happy, and it won't take that long, I think he'll go on to be world champion this year, probably. But Max Verstappen in that Red Bull is bloody quick.
Yeah, well, Red Bull certainly seem to have the straight line advantage, Munnis, don't they? Maybe not the reliability that they yet want, but certainly that advantage. But Ferrari, consistent and have a very good all-round package. This is going to be potentially interesting all the way to the end of the season. As a result of Saudi Arabia, though, and a lot of whinging from Max of Charles crossing the pit entry line. That's all I remember hearing from Max's radio. And then everyone get it going, oh, isn't it nice that they got out the car and they said well done to each other and it was an even fair race. Well, if you listen back to the radio, Max was whinging his head off most of the time following Charles. But it's a good thing to have, isn't it, Munnis? I mean, this is the changing of the guard now a little bit in terms of Lewis now dropping back and two youngsters having a crack. It was always going to happen. It was only a matter of time. But the Red Bull versus Ferrari, do you think it's going to be all the way to the end of the season, or do you think Ferrari are going to just develop the crap out of this car and go forward that Red Bull won't be able to keep up?
Certainly hope it will go all season. I think this year Ferrari look the goods. I think they're in it for the duration of the season. And I'll tell you what, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, that will get so toxic. It will pale in insignificance to what we've seen from Max and Lewis. It really will. Like, Leclerc on his day is just ruthless. He has a killer instinct. But to Freya's point, I think he's showing us definitely a maturity about him this year. He's making better decisions. He's not as rash. And I think that'll stand him in good stead for the season ahead. I actually think he can win the title. I really do. I know I said at the start of the season I thought Carlos, but I think Carlos might just lack that X factor compared to Charles. But maybe Campy's right. Maybe he's just not up to speed with the car yet.
One of the benefits, of course, of Ferrari performing well is that other Ferrari-powered teams are performing well. And Campy, we haven't spoken yet to you about Haas's significant rise and the change in fortunes and the departure of Mazepin and the entry of K-Mag. So give us your thoughts. And also, Haas have performed very well at the Australian Grand Prix. All you have to do is look at the first season of Drive to Survive, where they've gone from looking like a bunch of wankers to looking like a bunch of legends for the first race of this season. What can they do at the Australian Grand Prix?
Oh, I think K-Mag will be looking for P5, behind the two Red Bulls and the two Ferraris at every race. I think Bottas will be as well. Stoked to see K-Mag back. I mean, masterstroke of a decision. He's a bona fide F1 driver. I think I have had my chance to say something about that in the first episode, maybe. But hey, and first race back, whatever he got, I can't remember what it was. He finished 10th in the second race too. But that fifth to 10th in the scoring, I think that's wide open. Could be anyone. We've seen Alpines be extremely quick at times, particularly over one lap in qualifying. Can't count out George Russell or Lewis Hamilton. I think Mercedes will figure it out at some stage, though. I think they are. I don't think it's as dire as what the media is playing out to be. I think Lewis has been pretty calm and composed when talking to media this year. I think we've probably got a bit more out of George Russell. He said, well, we know what the problem is, and we're trying to fix that problem. And I think once that problem's fixed, I think they'll be right back where they want to be, competing with the Ferrari and the Red Bull, but it might take some time. But as for K-Mag and Haas, I mean, love that for their organisers. Love that for their organisation. I think Mick Schumacher's getting shown up a bit. Not sure he's the driver that we want him or some have predicted him to be. Although this year will be a good year for him. I mean, his second race was better. But unfortunately, when K-Mag's getting fifth place on debut after being signed 10 days earlier, or whatever, like fifth or sixth or whatever it was from memory, that doesn't look good for Mick Schumacher, who's been in the car for a while. So anyway, look, they can do anything they want.
Defending Mick, though, at least he now has someone to learn from rather than just another rookie alongside. So
absolutely,
you would expect that K-Mag would immediately be faster because he's just got more experience in a Formula One car, understanding setup and the rest of it, especially from teams like McLaren and Renault, and then coming into Haas. He has that wealth of knowledge and Yeah, as Freya said to me at one point, the joy that we have is ridiculous just to see K-Mag back in the paddock. It's who knows why it's there. It's just there, and it's bloody good to see it.
How good's this for Oscar Piastri though? I mean, you got Guan Yu Zhou or Zhou Guan Yu, whatever his name is. He's come out and performed really well. And we know that Oscar's better than him. Like, hands down, there was one race last year where Guan Yu Zhou got the better of him. I think it was at Baku. But every other race, Oscar was miles ahead of him, and race pace and qualifying pace was way better. So I think it says a lot for Oscar and where he's going to come into with his pecking order within the sport. Hopefully he gets a couple of drives this year due to COVID or something.
Well, from memory, he will be doing a free practice session in Australia. I think I've read that somewhere. So that'll be good to see him in a current car rather than one of the previous Renault cars. Let's talk, though, about the other Australian, of course, DR. It's his home race, or his second home race, or third home race, depending if you include a team and where he actually lives. The Australian Grand Prix advantage, hometown advantage. Hopefully it's worth a couple of tenths, although I doubt it. Different scenario for McLaren, though, Freya, from the desert. Obviously, we know that the cooling issues were the biggest issues for them in comparison to Barcelona for testing. Hopefully that's not a thing for them in Melbourne. But with looking back at last week's race, we saw, of course, McLaren get some points with Lando. He was only seventh, I think, by a tenth of a second or 100th of a second from Ocon. So there is some upsides, I suppose. Andreas Seidel said that he's got confidence that DR would have finished in the points too if it wasn't for the issues. So what can we expect for Daniel, apart from him winning the World Championship this year, which is still technically possible? What can we expect from him? What does success look like for DR this weekend?
Success, I think, is just constantly improving on each race at this point in time, to be honest. Like, they just have to keep stepping in the right direction and not fall back into what we kind of saw in that first weekend, which was abysmal at the end of the day. It was positive to hear him speaking quite optimistically about how the car felt last weekend, in that he said, there's only so much you can do in a week, and the difference was quite significant in his view in terms of what they had managed to achieve in that 1 week. So that, I think, was gave me a bit of optimism that maybe was lacking before. So hopefully that is the same again. And yeah, again, if the cooling issues aren't as much of a problem, then maybe he's got a better chance of performing. I'm hoping that this is a track that we just get to see some of the actual kind of racecraft of the more experienced drivers being allowed to do its work. Again, they've got cars that they're more able to do that in now. And I think that's where K-Mag will absolutely shine in Melbourne, is what I think is going to happen, because we're actually going to be able to let them race. And it's on a track where we should see more overtaking in comparison to previous years. And hopefully DR fits into that category as well.
Munnis, what's your expectations for DR this weekend?
Look, for me, hopefully he can finish in the points. I think that would be a good step forward for him. The temperatures this week are going to be low 20s, so hopefully that helps car performance, and hopefully there's more upgrades coming. We've got to remain positive, and yeah, he is at home. Hopefully the crowd can get behind him, and just hope and pray that we can get some points on the board and make a step forward for the season.
Campy, our boy DR. I mean, it's not been a good start, has it, to his World Drivers' Championship 2022 campaign. But from your view, finally, what do you think we can expect?
Anyway, I've got no expectation for Danny Rick. He'll beat Lando. I think his race pace is better than Lando. I think qualifying, he's better than he was last year, which is good. He still had less time in the car. I think qualifying, I think both have been within like a tenth or something, which is fine for me. Like, if you're within a tenth of your teammate, that can be made up by breaking a fraction of a second later or earlier, getting on the accelerator. So that's not a big deal for me. But the race pace has been better from his teammate. But yeah, no expectations. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens. Well, it's only a couple of days away. Very, very excitingly. Let's get your predictions, you three. Who you think the podium will be? Munnis, let's start with you first, second, third. Who do you reckon?
Ooh, Leclerc first, Second, I'll go with Max. And third, I'm going to say Oscar Piastri because Ocon's going to be down with COVID. I'm going bullish.
The unexpected podium we didn't know we needed.
That's right.
Freya, how about you?
Max, K-Mag, DR.
Yep, that's absolutely a wishful podium. Campy for you?
Alonso, Kimi, Matthias Raikkonen will make a comeback. I think it'll be a Red Bull 1-2 because their straight line speed's too good. And I think Carlos will get third.
If you too think that Kimi Raikkonen is coming back, feel free to join us in person where we can talk about it. Ahead of the Australian Grand Prix, we will be gathering for some drinks in a location which is yet to be determined. As I said, okay, Coppersmith, great. There you go. The details
Clarendon
exactly.
Street, South Melbourne.
Lock it in.
Great. There you go. You can tell
Friday
we really
night, 6
spoken
o'clock.
a lot about this. Friday night, 6 o'clock, Coppersmith in Melbourne. Make sure you join us if you can. South Melbourne. It's all the same place once you're outside of New South Wales like me. And come and say good day. We would love to see you. And for a live recording, there is potentially a live podcast recording with Munnis, Tommy T, Campy, and myself on Sunday after the race. So if you're around, you can join us then. We will share more details on our Discord and on social media. So make sure you follow us for both those things. Guys, fantastic to talk ahead of the Australian Grand Prix. I'm bloody excited. Make sure also you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. We will be doing a hell of a lot of video content this week. So you get to see not so pretty faces there. But it is time to say goodbye. We can't wait to see Kimi Raikkonen come back for the Australian Grand Prix. Right. There you go. What a disaster.
Absolute disaster.
Edit that I'm going to have. Freya's trying to take the piss out of Campy while Campy's actually giving an answer. That's my favourite part.
No.
After that first race, my hopes and dreams have been smashed.
Or don't. We don't want to know what you think anyway.
Not sure. Well, yeah, who knows? I really got no idea. I got no expectation for them. I'm just trying
please
to
do an imitation of
not
what you
be
think he's
cynical.
going to say.
2 races in, do that.
Freya, you obviously can't hear him weekend though.
No. There you are.